Hello, everyone. Welcome to Prophecy Roundtable. We're going to have a great conversation today. We don't have all the answers, but there's a lot of fun stuff to talk about. Today, we are going to talk about interdimensionals, demonic possession, and the mark of the beast. And to help us wade through some of these topics, we have Jessica Arellanes back with us by popular demand. And so we're looking forward to that. If you have some questions, you can put them in the chat. Now, just a couple things. First of all, I've been telling you about this amazing book that's been coming out that I've been working on for about 10 years. This one right here. All right. So Regenesis Code. Check it out. It is on my website, douglashemp.com. It's on Amazon. It's on Audible. It's actually here on YouTube. So if you want to check it out right here and just listen, doesn't cost you a cent. All right. Just, say like and share it with somebody. That's the plan. And the goal is to make this into a movie. All right. I think the time has come. There's so much good stuff in the Bible. We need to get that on the screen. So pray about that. If you know of movie producers, directors, whoever, financiers, that's the people we really need, right? The executive producers. We need those guys to make this into reality. And we know it can happen. We're just going to have to work hard to make it happen. So appreciate your help. And all right, without any further ado, let's get into our discussion. Hey, Jessica, so glad you were here. Glad that you can join us. So yeah, we were joking that we picked a nice light topic tonight. But to kind of kick it off, what we thought we would do is start off in 2 Kings chapter 6. This is really one of my favorite passages. I think it's just so cool because Elisha is getting away from the Syrians, and basically Elisha and his servant wake up in the morning, and it's kind of funny. And so he wakes up, and the servant is kind of freaking out, right? Because he's like, oh no, master, what do we do? And he says, look, don't worry about it. Those that are with me, those that are with us are more than are with them. All right, so let's just check this out here. So go and see where he is, that I may send and get him. And he was told, saying, surely he is in Dothan. Therefore he sent horses and chariots. This is the king of Syria, and a great army there. And they came by night and surrounded the city. And when the servant of the man of God arose early and went out, there was an army surrounding the city with horses and chariots. And his servant said to him, alas, my master, what shall we do? So he answered, do not fear, for those who are with us are more than those who are with them. And Elisha prayed and said, Lord, I pray, open his eyes that he may see. Then the Lord opened the eyes of the young man, and he saw, and behold, the mountain was full of horses and chariots of fire all around Elisha. All right, so that is really an incredible window into the unseen realm, to use the really cool term that Dr. Heiser came up with. But the spiritual realm, the interdimensional realm, and that's one reason I titled it interdimensionals, because we often talk about extra dimensionals, and we see that on Ancient Aliens. We see it all over the place. You've got MUFON and UFO enthusiasts all around, and they're looking, suggesting, maybe believing. In fact, a lot of scientists believe that directed panspermia, that somebody way out there, maybe a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, decided to come and visit the good old Earth and dropped off some DNA, and bada boom, bada bing, here we are, and that all happens, right? We see this in movies all the time, right? You had Prometheus, where the aliens from a distant galaxy did just that. They dropped off some DNA, and here we are, right? So that's the general narrative that a lot of people hold on to. Even Francis Crick, who was the co-discoverer of DNA, he came up with the theory of directed panspermia, suggesting that, of course, no way that just evolution out of nothing, out of rocks, could have started all this. There had to be some information. And it's becoming more prevalent among researchers to think maybe these aren't extraterrestrials, but maybe they're interdimensionals. I heard George Knapp talk about this on TMZ. He was asked, do you think they come from outside our solar system. And he said, you know what? No, I think they've always been here. He said, I think they exist behind some kind of a thin psychical dimensional membrane. And I'll tell you, my jaw dropped when I heard that. I'm like, that's what the Bible says. You know, the Bible just calls it the veil. The Bible calls it the veil, and, you know, call it what you want. Others call it the cosmic curtain, whatever. Right. But that would explain how you can have some kind of craft, these Tic Tacs, excuse me, Tic Tacs, there we go, that are, you know, flying around back in 2004. They're being chased by Navy pilots, and then they just disappear. Or, you know, somehow they go from 80,000 feet down to water level and below without a splash. And you're like, something really weird is going on. They seem to be self-luminous. Something's happening. Something is out there. That something is out there is without a doubt. But what is it? And I think the biblical answer is interdimensionals. So, Jessica, what do you think? Tell us your opinion, and maybe we'll agree, maybe we won't. So go for it.
Well, interesting. If you can first, can you define interdimensional and explain the difference between interdimensional and extra dimensional?
Well, I think interdimensional would be a being that is able to communicate between the two realms, right? So, you know, the Bible talks about this veil. So Ezekiel, he's sitting by the river Chebar with the captives of Judah, and he says that he saw the heavens opened at the baptism of Jesus. The heavens were opened, and the Holy Spirit descended like a dove. At the stoning of Stephen, the heavens were opened, and he saw Jesus standing at the right hand of the Majesty on high. In Revelation, John sees the heavens open, and then he sees Jesus coming. So, you know, I remember when I was watching the Avengers, one of the Avengers, I don't know if it's number 3 or something, and lo and behold, they had this portal that just started to open, right? And of course, now they do it in all the Avengers movies. But, you know, a portal somehow just out of thin air, you have this doorway. And that is kind of what I see it, that there's some kind of a veil, a membrane, a cosmic curtain that is blocking our view of that ancient world. And that's what Elisha did, is he prayed that the Lord would open the young man's eyes so that he could see beyond this veil. He could see beyond this realm, this dimension, and into the other dimension. So, you know, the good angels, as far as I can tell, have no problem coming and going. In fact, we're told that we are supposed to entertain angels or entertain strangers because we might be entertaining angels unaware. But the bad ones seem to have limitations, and they seem to need blood and seances and all kinds of occult rituals to allow them to pass through.
Or to communicate. To communicate, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I would even say before you jumped on, Jessica, I was talking to Doug.
Yeah.
We have a good Elohim, a little G God, a spirit, if you will, of Samuel, where Saul goes to the witch at Endor and conjures up, does some type of spell or something. And Samuel's Elohim, his spirit, comes up and he's kind of irritated. He's like, why did you disturb my rest? I mean, scripture is pretty clear that is Samuel's spirit.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And so there, and, you know, obviously Torah, the law, God's word forbids what Saul was trying to do. But even there, God allowed Samuel's spirit to be called up and communicate to him, and Saul didn't get a good report in that circumstance. So that would be an example. Go ahead.
Well, no, that would be an example of what? Communicating with the dead. That's necromancy, correct?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I'd say they're in another dimension, or you know, it's not something that I don't go around every day talking to my dead father. You know, I don't pray to my father. I've never asked my father to come back and communicate with me. But
yeah,
I would say once we pass from this time domain, that we do enter into maybe another dimension. You know, I don't want to get into soul sleep versus what exactly happens upon death, but obviously Samuel's spirit was alive. He was able to communicate with Saul, but Saul was doing that against Torah, something that he shouldn't have been doing. So nobody, I don't know, nobody start doing that. It was not good. So,
All right. I got something.
Good.
All right. 2 Peter. So we're talking about communication and this veil of separation.
Yep.
It's interesting. 2 Peter chapter 2, verse 4 says, "For if Elohim spared not the angels that sinned by leaving their habitation or their natural domain, but cast them down into Sheol or Hades and delivered them into," here's the key, "chains of darkness." So the chains are these chains of darkness to be reserved unto judgment. So it's interesting to note that they are kept for judgment in the abyss or in these chains. And in Jude 1:6, it says, "in these everlasting chains under darkness." So if you ask me, this darkness is what's restraining them. They are bound by the darkness, which would be considered the unseen realm, that immaterial realm, in utter darkness. And so the idea, their desire then would be to make themselves manifest in this realm, right? To make contact through the dark arts, which we have seen throughout time. Secrecy, it's called secrecy, mysterion, esoteric, and schools of knowledge, mystery schools, the shadow realm. You know, you could even see today, currently, we have something called D-Wave computer technology. But I want to make a note here. So in Daniel chapter 8, 23 through 25, it says, "And in the latter time of their kingdom, when the transgressors are come to the full, a king of fierce countenance and understanding dark sentences or dark sayings," these mysterions, these shadow realm knowledge, "shall stand up, and his power shall be mighty, but not by his own power. And he shall destroy wonderfully, and shall prosper and practice, and shall destroy the mighty and set apart people." Well, if you know anything about alchemy purports to do this, right? To create or to transmute metals, if you will. But I mean, I think it's a little bit more than that. The idea is that they would try to create this elixir of immortality. But the Enochian, John Dee's Enochian language also desired to do that. In fact, John Dee states that the revelation he received came from angels, and he received it through esoteric knowledge, these dark secrets, or this language that helps to convey between those two realms. And that realm is a realm of darkness, which is the unseen realm, and then the realm that we exist in. And I do believe that these entities desire to be loosed from that realm, that shadow realm, right? And come into this realm to materialize. And so they have used, John Dee is something, I mean, his Enochian language, I don't know if you all studied that or if you know anything about his language, but it's pretty dark.
Wow.
Yeah. And
No,
it's
go on.
actually mixed in with the English language.
How so? I would love to hear some examples.
So a lot of the, well, you know about the English language. The English language was, well, what we know today as the English language, not the King's language, but the English language we use today was initially created for trade, for bartering. And so it was for trade. It was a trade language that they used when they would basically, what's the word I'm looking for? Do business with other, when they would come across the ships, and they would have different weights and measures, different ways of bartering, you know, different forms of currency. And so they created, or they included in the language, a mixture of language that would help them to trade, help them to barter. And yeah, my mind is going, wait, I'm all over the place right now. So I'm thinking of this language that we speak today, John Dee, right, and his Enochian language. And so I'm actually going to put a video out that shows how it progressed and how it was incorporated into
what time frame did he live in?
You know, I don't know what time frame he lived in, but you can do some, I think it was the 1500s, somewhere around there, 1600s, early 1600s. Yeah.
Okay.
When he was,
well, you know,
when
it's
his work was
interesting.
Popular.
Yeah, I like that you brought out 2 Peter, because that, you know, I agree with you. It really does bring out that whole idea of these angels, right, that are delivered into this place. This is actually the word Tartarus, not hell. I think hell is a terrible translation.
Right, you're right. Yeah.
But yeah, the chains, there's some kind of chains. What kind of chains? They're gloomy thick darkness is the idea, thick gloomy or something like that. And the very word occult means dark, right? So something is Spanish oculto, right? It's dark, right? And so that is the basic idea. Now, do you think, where would the good angels reside in that general idea? Do you think that they're in a same kind of realm, or is it a different realm in your understanding? Where does Michael hang out?
They're not in Tartarus.
Well, clearly. Well, what realm are we talking? Is there a dark realm, and then there's a good angel realm, and then where we are?
Obviously, I think they're in to just use Heiser like you did earlier. They're in this unseen realm, this other dimension, if you will, that most of us humans cannot see. But we do see in Revelation where there's going to be a war in the heavens, and they're going to be cast down to earth. So that's when I think it gets really biblical up in here. In other words, these interdimensional beings, these angels, these sons of God, higher beings, if you will, are going to be cast from their place in the heavens down to earth. And I think that's what's being set up right now with the predictive programming, the Ancient Aliens, all the shows that are coming out, the movies. They're just getting everybody ready to be deceived, in my opinion. The panspermia theory, which is just kicking the evolution can down the road. The aliens did it. It's all part of the programming process for that final ultimate deception that I believe there's going to be a highest god of these, or highest alien, which will be Satan. And we can become like them. We can become these more than human evolved beings. We can become like our gods. Nothing new under the sun. It goes all the way back to Genesis. But I know I sound like a broken record there, but I think that's what's happening in the movies.
Yeah, I think so too. Jessica, you made me kind of think about something here, that because I've always sort of imagined these angels, they're like chained to the floor, and it's really dark, and whatever these chains are, they're just really dark chains, but you kind of gave me the idea that maybe they're not so much chained to the floor, but they're imprisoned in that realm, and that they're not allowed to come to this realm. Is that how you see that?
That's the way I see it. Absolutely. Okay. And I did find my notes on John Dee. Thank you very much. So I do have that information. John Dee was actually popular. His work was popular in the, I think it was, see, you got me going. Well, anyways, I'll come back to that in just a second. I'll let you know. 1583 to 1584 is when he was popular. But let me quote something here. This is pretty good. So he says something. There's something called the angelic keys, and he was seeking these visions, seeking contact with this dark realm. But he also had lots of journals, and in his journals he referred to his language as, listen to this, celestial speech, the first language of God Christ, holy language, and the language of angels. And so interesting to note that he was seeking knowledge from this realm, this shadow realm, so that he could materialize. He also practiced alchemy as well. So here, noting it says, Dee mentioned in his personal journals that God had sent good angels to communicate directly with him as a prophet, and that he also had a scryer who, by the name of Edward Kelly, who he called a seer. So under this impression, he was believing that he was receiving revelatory knowledge or prophetic knowledge, when in fact it was esoteric knowledge, and it was very, very dark. So again, back to his angelic keys, which I won't quote here on your channel, but you can go and do some research for your audience out there. But he created this whole entire language, but a lot of it was sorcery and alchemy, and to conjure these angels, or to give them access to this realm. In fact, he I think it was Queen, I have it in my notes here, I think Queen Elizabeth, he worked with her in her seances, again, to conjure up these entities in order to receive this mystical information. And I believe that it also helped them to advance in technology. If you look up the first mathematician Her name was Ada, and she was also a fortune teller and a soothsayer who had many seances. I forget who her father was, but he was extremely popular during her time. But she was the first mathematician, female, to create a computation device, which is what the government uses today. And their computation device is called AIDA. And so it's interesting that she was a witch. And she received revelatory knowledge to help her advance technologically and to create the first, sort of type of working computer with her ones and zeros. But yeah, this information, why would they need technology? I do again believe that it's because they want to materialize. They want to be able to exist. I do also believe that some entities can cohabitate with the frame of man, but it's temporary because of the will of man. Because we have a will, we can sort of resist. We don't recognize that perhaps this is an influence, an evil influence that's provoking us to sin or error. So then sometimes we think, oh, that's just I just got to really work on that. And so I'm not what is it called? Willpower, right? And so we resist. And then, they lose control of the vessel. They lose control. And so they want to create a frame in which they can cohabitate with, or and engage in this realm. And that's why I think artificial intelligence will come into play. And what is it when they mix
hybrid?
What are they doing right now with robotic? Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, hybrids. I don't know. I'm just
computer.
So would D kind of be like, not that he was teaching or learning anything new from these entities, but would he sort of be like Blavatsky, or I forget the lady's full name, Claire, and then you've got Alistair Crowley, and I may not be saying the name right, but those types of individuals that claim to get their revelations from these spirit beings. So
exactly.
So, I mean, again, this isn't new. I just think right now it's went mainstream. They're not even really hiding it anymore, what they're trying to do. So it's not kept in the shadows or in the dark. It's in your face.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, that's basically my theory in Cryptic Image 2. I make the case that the Nephilim were, the whole point was to try to make these biosuits. Like, I don't think that the sons of God came down. They're like, oh, women are so pretty, and I just want to have a little family and a white picket fence and a couple kids, and we're just going to raise them and be so happy, and we'll have watermelon in the summer. I just don't think that's what the fallen angels, well, I think they were still good, quote unquote good at that point, with evil in their heart. But I think they came down because they saw an opportunity. And it actually says that the Nashim were tovot, that they were good. And I think that you have to be good for something, right? And I think the point was, hey, we can make our own vessels here so that we can exist perpetually in this realm. And and God had already taken away, for Satan and the ones that had already sinned, they were kind of in a bit of a spot because they were disrobed. They lost that covering that they had, this glory that they had. And Jesus tells us that when a demon is cast out of somebody, he goes into these dry places, and he's looking for something, some kind of comfort. And then he wants to go back because I guess it's not that fun to be, without a body to hang out in. So they're looking for something to live in. And I would argue that's what the whole Nephilim program was about, is that they're trying to make it. So they're actually trying to make avatars that they don't have to share with the actual host.
Right.
And yeah. So
and if you were talking about predictive programming in all of these, really what it is, it's just the emperor putting on new clothes, right? So we see, Superman and all of these, modern day superheroes, but it's just really mythology over and over. It's just, the new culture becoming culturally relevant. Repackaged. What's interesting to note, again, it's all predictive programming. They're pretty much letting you know because they do believe in karma. They believe in karma, right? So they feel as though as long as you're made aware of this, you're accountable. blood is not on my hands, right? So what's interesting to note is Romans chapter 3:13 says their throats are as open graves, their tongues practice deceit. It is the venom of vipers that's on their lips. And this is like a poison also mentioned in Psalm 58:4, this poison of the serpent. So we're talking about language here and how they attempt to communicate with this realm or hosts within this realm. So the information that I was talking about, it was Queen Elizabeth, and he was John Dee was Queen Elizabeth's astrologer. And back to Ada, I just want to give you some information so your viewers can research this. So Ada Lovelace, that's who she was, Ada Lovelace, and her father was Lord Byron, really famous author back in the 1800s. Well, she, I'll just quote it here, says here that she was the proposed mechanical general. She created the general purpose computer called also the analytical engine. She was the first to recognize that the machine had applications beyond pure calculation. And our defense, our military defense, we use some of her language along with, I think another language called Pascal, something like that, Pascal programming.
Mm-hmm.
But nonetheless, they use the foundation of her information for our military defense. And so lots of this is sort of interwoven together, right? Communicating through technology. We think that it's just, fun and applications, and gamification, and we're just getting our little hits, but our dopamine hits. But I do believe that there is something really
look at the leaps and bounds that were made. If you start to study Nazis and the upper level scientists and how involved they were with the occult, and you see the developments that were made in the 30s and in America when we brought the Nazi scientists over here. I mean, I don't think it's coincidence that this leap in technology occurred during that time period. So
yeah,
so
it's the Department of Defense. Department of Defense. Yeah. So that's where her programming is used in the Department of Defense. But nonetheless, if you even look at, I don't know if you've ever seen, I remember when I was in school, we had to watch this, I don't know what it was, a movie. It was called The Pirates of Silicon Valley. And it's basically a bio on Steve Jobs and the whole Apple computer and how it was brought to light. And if you know anything about his story, he basically left defeated. He left the U.S. defeated, and he went, and I think he went to Budapest. There he was, this is part of his bio. He claims to have been dropping a bunch of, psychotropic drugs or tropic drugs and, hallucinating and having this experience. I won't mention them here. But he was having an experience, and he claims when he came back that he had connected with these beings, these angels, or he received revelatory knowledge on how he could create the computer in such a way that each household would be able to have one in their homes. And again, this is knowledge that he claims that he received from spiritual entities. Even Stairway to Heaven, right? So about Led Zeppelin and what was his name? Page. What was the main singer's name? Yeah, Page, right? So
Robert Plant.
He purchased, Robert Plant. There you go. Well, they purchased Aleister Crowley's Abbey. And Aleister Crowley called himself the Beast, in which he also wrote his books. For example, he wrote the book of Thelema. Thelema is the Greek word for will, the will. And so, that's the whole of his, that's the theme of his, his dogma is do as you will, and this is the whole of the law. And so it was called the book of Thelema, the book of the will. Well, it's interesting is that the Led Zeppelin purchased his abbey, in which he did all his black magic and seances. I've even seen pictures of the abbey where there's like really chaotic sort of languages and symbols, but there's Hebrew also written, even as the other Satanist, what's his name, that uses Leviathan on the Hebrew language, Leviathan. Nonetheless, Page and Plant claimed that they received, and they had an encounter with a being, with an entity there in Aleister Crowley's Abbey, where they received this download. It was supernatural. right? They were also under the influence. And so it was a supernatural encounter, and they began to scry this stuff, and write it down. And that's when they received the stairway to heaven. Stairway, right? This stairway, which again would be this access point. So what really are they speaking? What are the words don't even make sense. So is it a conjuring?
Well, even you look in the Beatles, that one of their famous album covers, I forget which one it is, but Crowley is at the top of the, he's back in the background, but they've got him on the cover. So it's just more open and in our face now with all the I don't know, Katy Perry probably she comes close to winning an award. Rihanna, all these people, I mean, they're not hiding it.
Yeah, I want to share something. This is from the ancient world with all of the Tower of Babel. We focus a lot on Genesis 6. We talk about the Nephilim, and that's totally interesting, right? Because it's pretty wild. But there was something that was also just as alarming, and something that God himself had to step in because it was that bad, and so we see here Jesus says that you're going to see the angels ascending on the Son of God, the Son of Man, Jacob, right? He dreamt, and a ladder was set up in the earth, and the top reached to heaven. The angels were ascending and descending upon it. Now, obviously, that's the biblical record. But if you look at the names of the ziggurat or the ziggurats, whatever, the temple of the wielder of the 7 decrees of heaven and earth, that's in Borsippa. The temple of the stairway to pure heaven, Sipar. Temple of the ziggurat exalted dwelling place in Kish. Temple of the exalted mountain, which is the Ehur Sagalama. Temple of the foundation of heaven and earth in Dilbat. Temple which links heaven and earth, that is in Larsa. All right. And then in Babylon, you have the temple of the foundation of heaven and earth. All right. And so we're actually looking at the very site there of ancient Babel. This is what that temple actually looked like. And get this. So there's a stele that was found of Nebuchadnezzar II. He's talking the tower, the eternal house, which I founded and built. I have completed its magnificence with silver, gold, other metals, stone, enameled bricks, fir, and pine. The first, which is the house of the earth's base, the most ancient monument of Babylon. I built and finished it. I've highly exalted its head with bricks, covered it with copper. We say for the other, that is this edifice, the house of the 7 lights of the earth and the most magnificent ancient monument of Borsippa. A former king built it, they reckon 42 ages ago, but he did not complete its head. Wow. Okay. So I think this is the actual place. I'm absolutely convinced that this is the building. He says that he repaired it. He did not build it, right? So he gave it a complete overhaul and, beautified it and all that amazing stuff. But he himself did not actually build it. And it's called the foundation of heaven and earth. So what was happening? Babel, we call it Babylon, but in the Hebrew, it's actually Bab-el, which if you go back to Akkadian, Bab is gate, El is God. It's the gate of the gods. And I think that God himself stepped in because something so horrific, so terrible, so detrimental and deleterious to humanity that God had to take action and stop the building of what they were doing. And I think they were building a gateway, a portal to the gods. Right. Yes, please. Jessica, you have a comment or question. Go for it.
Okay. Can you maybe pull up? I don't know if I can share on this, but can I just show you what I think that gate was? Let's see if I can share.
You can share. Do you see a present? Do you see that?
Yeah, I do. Let's do it.
So,
let me show you what I think that was so nefarious. Do you see it?
Not yet.
Ooh. Oh, you don't?
Yeah, we see it. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Well, what is that? And
DNA
that's the
helix.
helix. That's the double helix, the DNA of man, right? This is
It's
the
a
DNA.
ladder. Mhm.
It's a ladder. It's
Yep.
a ladder with
Mhm.
coding
Mhm.
information, right?
Mm.
So what is it that they were striving? Where would they want to find the gene, the God gene, right? So this is what, that what's that big machine that they're trying to
CERN.
create? CERN, right? And that's what they're looking for, right? In Sweden, they're looking for the God gene. They believe they already found the God gene. Now they're just trying to figure out how they can control the God gene. But nonetheless, let me just stop sharing here. But it's interesting to note that this is a ladder. And so the way that I see it is that they were striving to manipulate DNA, believing that somehow they can find the point of creation, which would be God himself. And if you studied epigenetics, which they most recently discovered, it's not, I think it's only been like within the last 10 years that they discovered epigenetics, epi being on top of the gene, which controls behavior. And again, we were talking about predictive programming, all of these programs that are out there, all of these mythological superheroes, Ubermensch, Friedrich Nietzsche's Ubermensch theory, that we can all be supermen. And so what is it they're predicting? They're showing us in their little programs that we can't control man's will, right? We can alter his DNA, we can manipulate his thoughts, sort of like interrupt his thought process, create strongholds, mental strongholds, but we can't control the will of man. How can we do this? So I think this is what is really deterring them from using human beings for their flesh suits. So they're moving on to maybe technology and artificial intelligence, and maybe trying to create some sort of, robotic cyborg, in which they can even that's the word I was looking for, transhumanism. Absolutely. And so epigenetics will actually help them do this. It will help them to understand how behavior
can be passed on.
It doesn't alter the DNA.
That's right.
Yeah.
It's a great point, because epigenetics is really it's probably been maybe 15 or it's probably been longer than we realize, but it's been at least 15 or 20 years that they've been talking about this. And so epigenetics, there's learned behaviors that can be passed on. So let's say that you have two nuclear scientists that get married and they have kids. Their kids are more likely to be the proclivity toward being a nuclear scientist. Two musicians are more likely to have kids that will be already sort of wired in that way. And it, like you said, it's not actually in the DNA, but it's information that's coded on top of on the DNA. And of course, the opposite, the bad side, alcoholic parents can have a child that's more likely to be an alcoholic, right? Doesn't mean that it's a foregone conclusion, but there's just a higher tendency. And I actually think when God says that he will judge people to the third and fourth generation, people say, oh, God is so mean. I think God is actually being nice, because in fruit flies, we see that it goes to the 13th generation. But I think God was limiting it until the third or fourth generation, so that it would not go on perpetually, which is really kind of him, So, thanks God. But, it's interesting. I mean, I don't know. Well, of course I don't know a lot of things, but I have a feeling that it was not entirely just DNA that they were after. I get the feeling that these ziggurats were actually something they were trying to sort of reach some place within the atmosphere that they could in some way tap into a door, a portal into the other realm. I don't know if is it at 150 feet. I have no idea, but there was something that they were trying to do. Could be DNA was involved. Now, what's interesting is that Nimrod, we find Nimrod in the ancient world. This is where it gets really exciting. Nimrod was Ninurta in the ancient world. And what does his name mean? It means let's rebel. We find him as Ninurta, king of the earth or lord of the earth, in the ancient Mesopotamian iterations of that. And Ninurta was the son of Enlil. All right. And then, of course, we see in Genesis that Nimrod began to be Gibor. In the Greek, it's the word gigas. He began to be a hybrid. right? And then you take those same root letters, Mem, Resh, Dalet, you have Marduk. You have Martu, who is the god of the Amorites. What does God say to Abraham? Hey, know for certain that your descendants are going to be slaves, etc., because the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet complete. And their god's name was Martu. So Martu, Marduk, Nimrod, I'm like, we might be talking about the same guy here. And if Nimrod started off as a regular human guy, and then somehow he was transformed, and my sense is that, he started as regular human, so it wasn't like a demon or Satan for that matter birthed him or begot him, but he went through a transformative process later in life, and that he changed. So this kind of brings us up to the whole demonic possession thing, because what's interesting, who was called the son of perdition in history, right? We know who is going to be called the son of perdition, the Antichrist, the beast, but who was called the son of perdition? Judas, right? Judas was called the son of perdition. Like that, this is like a big neon sign. Hey, take a look over here, right? And we're told very specifically that Satan possessed or went into Judas. So, and again, things that kind of blew my mind. I was, doing the research in Corrupted Image 2, and I'm like, okay, there's something going on here with Nimrod. I got to figure this out. So I stumbled on this in this research. This guy named Chris, it's actually Chris Long out of Reno, Nevada. He had leukemia. He needed a bone marrow transplant. And so a German donor donated some bone marrow, and a forensics lab was monitoring his progress before, during, and after. Okay. So what they find is that several months into this, after getting this bone marrow transplant, they discovered that his DNA actually begins to change, and it's changing to that of his German bone marrow donor. Right. Wow. And Chris is like, whoa, this is pretty wild that I can sort of disappear. They even found that the DNA in his semen changed. Right. And I'm like, that seems kind of, it's kind of significant, that to me, it sounds like if he were to sire children, they might not be his. Right. So something pretty weird is going on there. And I get the impression that that Satan probably possessed Nimrod, but he possessed him perpetually, and that would have then begun to change Nimrod from just being a guy to then being the son of perdition, being the son of Satan. And that's what the ancient record suggests, is that Nimrod was actually the son of Enlil. So I think in the case of Judas, he didn't stick with the program long enough, and he went and killed himself, and bummer, Satan had to find a new willing vessel. But, I think that's the mechanism that it will happen. And that's what I think is going to happen with the coming son of perdition, that he will be possessed by Satan. There may be some other technological process that happens that, helps fast forward this whole thing. And, in my books, I suggest that maybe there's some kind of a quantum machine that is built that allows some kind of quantum entanglement to happen. I don't know. I'm just speculating, but something was happening, and and there's going to be this transformation that's going to happen in this guy.
Do you think the ultimate purpose was so they could become as gods? In other words, that's the entire purpose of the Genesis 11 Tower of Babel incident, where they're trying to get this portal, not only to get to the heavens, but to become immortal, to become a god again.
I think so.
And I do think that's the deception that's coming at the end of this age. You can be as gods. It's going to be It's going to be so strong that who knows about people, but if they don't know their scripture, if they don't know the word, if all they've done is sat in a church and they may have a very simple faith and never be shaken. But I believe a lot of people that have grown up even in church and attend sermons, they've never even heard discussions like this. They've grown up in this culture, and then they've been born and raised on evolution, and they might, Again, I'm not worried about the ones that are solid foundational and they're just kind of ignorant of scripture, but I'm talking about a lot of people that might have faith in Jesus right now and in Yeshua that could be easily deceived because they don't really know scripture. They don't know the end times deception. And I do believe we're getting close. I'm not a date setter, but everything is converging, aligning, and accelerating like crazy. So,
All right. Interesting to note here, since we're talking about inhabiting a frame. So if we go all the way back to Genesis, we see that the serpent was used, right? It says, and that he was used to communicate to the woman. And if we look at this word for serpent, nakash, it does mean a serpent literally, but it also means figuratively a soothsayer, a fortune teller, a necromancer, a sorcerer, right? A summoner, someone who summons or practices divination or omens or a fortune telling. And so we see that this was some sort of communication in which the words itself were, twisting and manipulating in order to seduce. Witchcraft, sorcery, that Enochian language, right? Well, looking at what alchemists attempt to do, that they strive to purify, mature, and perfect certain materials. And they really like their gold because they believe in the elixir of immortality. And I wanted to read this really quick. So the elixir of immortality known to alchemists is considered a potion that supposedly grants the drinker eternal life or youth. This elixir was also said to cure all diseases. And I think that would link back to, I'll probably say this right, but correct me, Doug, but Panacea? Is that how you say that? Panacea, the Greek goddess of universal health and welfare. Is that how you say Panacea?
I believe so, yeah.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So they do believe that it can cure all diseases. And what's interesting to note is that in ancient Mesopotamia, there was a elixir that was mentioned in the Epic of Gilgamesh, in which Gilgamesh comes to fear his own right. And so then he, his beloved companion, so then he seeks out, and I'll probably say this wrong too, but Utnapishtim, which is a Noah-like figure, and so he goes and he says, oh, go get he's an alchemist. He's an alchemist, right? So it's all tying together, right? And so what they're striving to do is to manipulate the elements, right? Manipulate the elements, create. And so
this is in my book. It's in Regenesis Code.
Is it?
So, yeah.
Yeah. So bingo, we got a winner. Yeah. So the thing
he actually had to go to the bottom. He had to go to the bottom of the ocean and talk to the snake. That was actually Utnapishtim just kind of told him which. And what's interesting about the word snake, nachash, I believe it's related to the word mushhushu. And I show in Corrupting Image 2 how linguistically they could be related. So M's and N's are very much related. And then, of course, you have the sh, right? So you have the nachash, and then you have mush, hush, shu, right? So a lot of those things become a little bit redundant, and then they just get simplified as languages kind of transition from one side to another. This happens all the time in linguistics. So I think, and what's interesting about the mushhushu is you can actually see the mushhushu. If you've ever seen the Ishtar Gate, there are two basic creatures there, which are actually the same, but there's a lion type of creature, and then there's a dragon type of creature. And the one with the long neck, the more dragon-like creature, it's a red dragon, and that is the mushhushu, and that is both a representation of Marduk, but it's also representation of Satan or Enlil.
Different topic, but how close is that to the red dragon on Chucky's coat of arms?
I don't know.
Chucky's.
But King Chucky.
That's a different topic for sure. Yeah. But anyway, so this mushhushu was very much a cosmic dragon type creature, mythological in the sense that you don't find it too often actually on the planet. But we were talking earlier about people taking some drugs and seeing into that dark realm. They were doing the same thing back then.
Ashwagandha.
Right? Oh yeah,
ashwagandha, right?
Ashwagandha or what what
Both
is
of you probably have more
yeah,
knowledge on this, but like America is not.
yeah.
It's name. Isn't it named after like a dragon? Um, Not necessarily Amerigo Vespucci or however you pronounce his Italian
Oh,
name, but like
oh,
you go look into the Incans and the Mayans, and you see the dragon art, and you go all the way to the Far East to China,
yeah.
etc., and you see the same type dragon entity. Doug, have you ever
The
done a?
Quetzalcoatl, is that what you're talking about?
Well, have you ever
Or
done?
Was it Quaddle?
It's it's been a
oh,
while since I read up
okay.
on it, but just the dragon symbology
Oh,
that you're talking about in the ancient Near East.
yeah.
It appears in America. It appears in the Far East and
Okay.
China.
Well, just the
Uh,
dragon, yeah, the whatever there's, different variations on this theme. Even in the ancient Mesopotamian world, you had variations on the theme of the dragon, but it was very much a hybridized being. And so sometimes it was a little bit more dragon-like, sometimes a little bit more lion-like, but it was a hybridized being. So it was a dragon that had eagle's talons. It spewed out venom or poison. It had wings. It had a serpent head phallus on it. I mean, it was pretty wild, but they were all basically, this is what's interesting. It was Enlil, Satan, and it was Marduk.
Right.
And you're like, well, which is it? And you're like, well, yes, that's the answer. And then, where
Right.
Daniel says that he saw a lion made to stand up like a man. Well, Marduk, as time went on, he went from being this lion that was always on 4 feet, that then he stood up. And you're like, oh my goodness, something is pretty weird here, So
Yeah.
there's so many linguistic connections that, again, pretty mind blowing.
Well,
But go on.
there's something called, there's two actually that are extremely popular for accessing any kind of like,
Ayahuasca, is that what you're talking about?
a DMT, yeah, or no, ashwagandha is ayahuasca. It's
Ayahuasca,
basically the
okay.
same, from the same plant,
Okay.
or
Okay.
ashwagandha, yeah.
Okay.
And why am I saying, is it ashwagandha? Ashwagandha is something I take every day. What are you talking about? Ashwagandha is not, no.
Ayahuasca.
Yes. What did
Ayahuasca.
ayahuasca. Ashwagandha is good, people. Ashwagandha
Okay.
is good. Ayahuasca,
Just
not
checking.
so good.
So
Yeah.
Jessica's
Thank you
been
for the
taking
correction.
some pretty hardcore stuff here.
Drinking it right now.
Yeah.
It's mushrooms, but the good mushrooms.
The good mushrooms. Yeah, it's too late. We got you on
You
video.
guys are too much. Okay. DMT, which what they call the spirit molecule. It's actually a Netflix documentary. Pretty good, but it's really, really trippy. But it's how they claim to access these realms, right? DMT. But I wanted to make mention of something. So in Numbers, you brought up that dragon, Numbers chapter 21, verse 6, where God sends them a fiery serpent. Well, this fiery serpent is the seraphim, right? Or the seraph. He says, let me find it here, actually.
Yeah,
fiery serpent.
Fiery, yeah.
But what's these fiery serpents. But the word is used twice by Isaiah to denote a dragon, a fiery dragon, the copper dragon, again, correlating to this serpent. And what's also interesting is that in John chapter 8, verse 44, when Jesus is talking to the Sanhedrin, I think it's the Pharisees in this case, he says, why do you not understand what I'm saying? Well, it's because you're unable to accept my message. You belong to your father, the Diablo, right? The devil. And you want to carry out his will, his desires, because you had initially brought up Judas, right? And when Yeshua says to him, go and do what's in your heart to do. And it says, then the devil entered his heart. Well, that would be the seed of your desires or your will, right? The lemma. And he says that they desire to carry out their father's will. It says he was a murderer from the beginning. And it was through his words. So he refusing to uphold the truth because there is no truth in him. And this is what's interesting, because when he lies, he speaks his native language, his lingua franca, because he is a liar and the father of lies. Well, guess what? That word is idios in the Greek. Did I pronounce that right? Idios in the Greek. But listen, it means one's own personal and private language, Enochian language, right? This was a private language that required initiation into having some form of mystery to it, or shrouded in mystery. So you were talking again about these beings being able to possess or take possession of the entity or the person. I believe back in the day when they were creating the Tower of Babel, they may not have had the technology. Well, obviously, they didn't have the technology that they have today, which is why alchemy came into play, so that they could create base metals that would somehow house the technology and conduct the information, right? So, but as time was progressing and technology was advancing, going back then, they didn't have that technology. So I'm sure that they assumed that God was somehow hidden in the gene of man, in the DNA of man. So then they discovered, maybe not so much, right? And then I also wanted to make a comment on what Doug said. I'm sorry, what Brother Scott said. I think there's a transaction that's made when you were talking about Nimrod, when the enemy barters with a man. I'm sure that he says to him, listen, I will make you great, right? I will make you great, and I will advance you, and I have knowledge that nobody else has. And with this knowledge, I can make you shine, right? And for that, you have to do my bidding, because you don't want to come into this dark realm. I could come to where you are, dwell among you, and I can cause you to live forever. But that wasn't what was promised in Genesis. Instead, he said that if you eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, right? But he says to him that you shall become like God's, knowing good and evil. And I think you have the best answer to that. Can you please remind us that they could have accessed? Remember I had brought that up before. I said, well,
right.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So I think God put that tree there very purposefully, because he wanted and wants us to be like him. And the only way to be like him is to have complete volition. And so God was forcing us to make a decision, but there were two options, right? One was to eat, the other was to not eat. And so obviously man ate, and then God said, hey, look, man has now become like one of us, knowing good and evil. Now, lest he stretch out his hand and take from the tree of life and live forever. And so the Lord God drove them out of the garden. But if Adam had said, I'm not going to eat from that tree, I don't care what you say, Satan, I'm not going to be tempted, I'm not going to do it, he still would have been making a choice. And that very choice would have then opened his eyes to the knowledge of good and evil, because God needs us, wants us to have the knowledge, but to choose the good and not choose the evil, right? So he doesn't want us to be just innocent little babes that we don't know good and evil. He actually wants us to know good and evil, but to choose the good. And I think God would have said, hey, look, man has now become like one of us, knowing good and evil. Now let him stretch out his hand and eat of the tree of life and live forever. But that got delayed. So one day we get to take it. So, yeah.
Excellent answer. But I think that kind of summarizes what you were saying about Nimrod not being born initially or inherently wicked, but that through that vain conversation, he believed that he was tapping into esoteric knowledge and receiving that he can become great and learn how to build and be a hunter and mighty on the earth and create a name for himself. And
and that's what I think the Amorites were doing, because God says to Abraham, the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet complete. So there was some kind of a process that was happening. They were in the midst of doing something naughty that they weren't supposed to do. And I think that's where Marduk, Nimrod, went to them and said, hey guys, guess what? I just became a god, and you can too. Right. And, here's the plan. So, do X, Y, and Z, and you could become like me. And, so we often kind of think, oh, it all ended with the flood. But I think that was only phase one. And Satan's like, I'm not giving up. I'm still going to try to accomplish my thing. Obviously, we can't have fallen angels mating with women. That didn't work out so well. And so we're going to go to another way to do it, but still accomplish the same basic end.
Oh. And again, back to the pattern, even though Yah scattered the people, we see these temples popping up in the Americas. We see them popping up in Africa. We see them popping up in the Indonesian islands. We see them popping up in Asia. I mean, there's literally nothing new under the sun as far as his plan to lie and deceive and keep
Yep.
humans from the true knowledge of the one true God. I mean, that's always been his plan.
Yep. Yep.
You know, back to that DMT molecule, it's interesting that, and yes, it's ayahuasca. Ooh. Anyways, but it's interesting. It's in some cultures, I think it's is it Brazil? I can't think where it's extremely popular for ritualistic purposes, but nonetheless, they claim that this is the death drug. Like it gives them an open door, it helps them to access the death realm or the unseen realm, right? So it's very similar to LSD, and I think it's dimethyltryptophan, something like that. Anyways, the idea is that you ingest this. However, it's a plant. They ingest it, and it takes you into a what they claim is that you experience this traveling or this teleportation, that you're out of body. They believe that's part of it, helps them to teleport. And it's this out of body. They have this out of body experience where they then enter in, they go through these tunnel realms. This is what people have said. They go through these realms or these tunnels, and then they access the spirit realm of death. And that's there that they confront, that they receive, again, that esoteric knowledge, that revelatory knowledge. But you know what it makes me think of too? Back in, the early, well, way before the Europeans, came here, you had indigenous people who this was very common, smoking peyote, smoking the leaves, doing the things. But they also, a lot of my people, the indigenous people, the Native Americans here, they believed in spirit guides or animal spirit guides. And so, they would get high, they would go into their trances, do their music, boom, 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 the drums especially. And they would then allow themselves to be taken over by a particular animal. And if it was a bear, it was an oso. If it was a falcon or a dragon or whatever it was, that they believed that they would then possess these attributes and characteristics, like a cheetah or a leopard, and run fast. And again, I think that was part of the trickery of these fallen ones to try to understand how they could create a hybrid human. See, these Malachim, these angels, they don't want this mortal body that's frail and got aches and pains and diabetes and whatnot. No, they want Ubermensch. They want to create a superhuman that will allow them to do what they used to do in their former state, which is to travel through space and time and to fly and to, excel speeds and, swim underwater. And
and that got me thinking about the entire world will be deceived by her pharmakia. And and Doug, I don't know, I don't think you really went down this path, but could they be looking for a drug, some type of concoction, if you will, coupled with the technology that would transform us to a godlike status? In other words, a combination of the technology, the pharmakia, because you hear even like Kushner and other people saying, well, hey, our kids will live forever. They will be transhuman, but there's got to be some pharmakia involved.
Well, I think, in my opinion, it's not just a chemical substance, but I think it's going to be a genetic transformation, right? Chemicals come and go. They can have, obviously, side effects, but so can genetics. But, a genetic change is a permanent change.
Like a spiritual change.
Yeah.
More of a spiritual change. Like Jessica was just talking about, as far as the indigenous people, the Native Americans, they would take this drugs and they would sort of absorb the life of the gazelle or the bison, and so I can see how that could play into it. A combination of maybe some hallucinogenics with some, like Captain America. They shot him up with these drugs and everything, and he became this Nietzsche model. He became this super soldier,
right?
Yeah.
And he was practically immortal.
Exactly. And it sounds, sign me up, man. If I don't have to do my own push-ups and I'll just take a drug, it sounds pretty good. I mean,
Look at fentanyl.
that's the allure, is that it's going to be great. You just have to do this thing. And that's where I think we're going to have this convergence, right? This is where I think you have the whole alien deception. We're
Right.
here to help you. We're here to help you evolve. And you know what? You've been evolving this long, and we're just a little further
Right.
down the road than you are. So here, take our DNA. We're going to give it to this one guy called the Beast, and he'll be the prototype. And he'll become the first dude to be transformed. Then take his DNA, and you can become a god like him. And by the way, you should get it, because there's a bunch of hostile aliens coming, and we're going to need to fight them. That's basically corrupting the image and Regenesis Code.
And you can do anything. You can do as thou wilt too.
Exactly. Do what is right in your own eyes.
Love, the gospel of the Beatles.
That's right.
Right. Yep. And I think, again, that's where the attraction is that these entities can convey to a specific person that they could give to them whatever their heart's desire in the temporal realm in this, moment in time. And then, but there is a contract. What is the contract? Not that they have the right to take your, everything belongs to the Father, Creator, but they lie, right? And they say, hey, we can give you fame and glory. And, I know all the producers. But going back to what you were saying about drugs and pharmakia and sorcery, absolutely. Like, look at fentanyl. Fentanyl is just really, it is everywhere and laced in everything. But what would be the purpose of them utilizing pharmakia or drugs? Again, the idea is, how do we control the will, right? So here in California, if you get pulled over while you're under the influence of a drug, it's called an 11550A. The charge is an 11550A. It means under the influence of a controlled substance or agent. It means that you're being controlled. So I have a degree as a drug counselor. I was in school for that forever, in psychology and Christian counseling. And I remember really understanding the dynamic of drugs and the role that they play on your will. Your ability to cognize information, to think critically, or to be in control. You're no longer in control. And this influence, you're being influenced, right? So this gives, it's an access. It's an access point. It allows those unclean spirits to come in and to manipulate your thought process, to manipulate your reality, your paradigm, right? Again, to shift into the dynamics. And they don't care if they are ruining your being. They don't care if they're destroying your soul. They want to guinea pig, right? They want to use human beings to try to figure out, again, how they can access this realm permanently, right? Remove the flesh suit, right? And so if, that whole idea of animal spirits, right? So like a werewolf, for example, shape-shifting. This is what these Native Americans believe. They believe that they were able to shape-shift, and the mythical creature, the werewolf, is not something that's new. This is something that they believed way back, mentioned in 60 AD, like shape-shifting, right? Again, you look at, the Dead Sea Scrolls, you got the 200 angelic beings that fell, and they were manipulating animals. Why? They were manipulating trees. They were manipulating plants. Again, what were they striving to do? Try to access these attributes and characteristics, right?
Yeah, it says it in the Book of Giants. It's called miscegenation, where they were
miscegenation.
They were making monsters. They were messing with the genetic code.
Yep.
We don't know. Of course, there's only fragments of that writing, which is a bummer. But and so it's interesting, because when it comes to the mark of the beast, it's not only, whatever is going to be on your forehead or on your hand, right? There's 3 things that are required for you to be in big trouble, right? You have to take the mark, you've got to worship the beast, and worship the image. And to me, and please correct me if you see it differently, but as I understand it, and this is why sometimes when you can have a nocebo or a placebo, right? The mind's ability to believe that whatever you're taking will have an impact on you, good or bad. A placebo is a good, it's good. A nocebo is obviously bad. So sometimes men that don't have hair, and they take Rogaine, but they're only taking a placebo of Rogaine, but they believe it, and they actually grow hair. And sometimes people read those, the negative side effects of, if you take this drug, it's going to do this and this and this to you. And it turns out they're only taking a placebo, but they believed that it was the real thing. There was a guy that was on antidepressant medication. He was only on a placebo, but he thought it was real. His girlfriend broke up with him, so he was like terribly sad. He overdosed, and he started dying. Like his body started to shut down, and he felt really bad about it. He's like, "What have I done?" Went to the hospital. They checked him out, and they couldn't find anything medically wrong with him because it was all in his head. So my point here is that actually our cells have little gates on them, and they basically, you're sending chemical signals or electrical signals from your brain to your cells saying times are good, times are bad. Okay. So if things are good, then the cell opens up, it receives nutrients and all kinds of communication with the outside of the cell. If things are bad, if you're being chased by a lion or whatever, then the cell closes and it doesn't allow nutrients to come in. So what I understand is that part of the worshiping of the beast and the worshiping of the image is that you have to want this. It's not something that can be forced upon you. They can't just strap you down and say, you're going to take this whether you like it or not. It's like, no, I don't want it. And if you don't want it, I don't think it's going to have an effect.
Different topic. That's one of the main reasons. And I know there are some that teach that the little jabby jab was the mark, but there's no worship involved. A lot of people just got scared and got tricked. A lot of people thought it was a good idea at the time, even though they weren't like freaking out scared. They just trusted the science. But it's just one reason why it's going to create a Chicken Little approach. That when this does come on, when we do get to the Great Tribulation, when we do get to the mark of the beast, which will involve, I personally believe it will involve a physical mark, and it'll, like you're saying, Doug, a spiritual component, a worship component. Like you're truly placing your faith in this beast for your eternity almost. You're almost going to deify this beast and want to become like him and choose this deception versus getting tricked into taking an experimental mRNA, device, jab, whatever. Yeah. So, I mean, I know there's a lot of people, especially, I don't like to use the word Hebrew roots or Messianic, but a lot of us who now believe Yeshua meant what he said, that are teaching this, and they're still teaching it. And I just think it's when we do get there, maybe some people might, sort of like the 88 reasons why Jesus is coming in 88. A lot of people got disillusioned with prophecy, and now they don't even pay attention. Or the Y2K, they got all in on Y2K, and then when nothing happened, now they've cast prophecy to the wayside. Or whether it be 2014 or 2017, and they're like, oh, there's a bunch of, and again, I do believe he's got a 7-day plan, a 7,000-year plan. I think we're approaching year 6,000. But I would never want to lead someone astray if we're sitting around in 2035 to say that prophecy is incorrect. And that's what I see happening. So many people want to fast forward to the end when we're not quite there yet. It could happen very quickly. I mean, I could be in Israel and some major stuff go down during Sukkot. I mean, my wife's like,
Make sure you take your golf clubs.
Are you sure you want to go to Israel this fall, Scott? 7 years prior to 2030. I'm like, yeah, I think Yah wants me to go to Israel. So
hey, we're going in 2024, and there's still space on the bus if you want to go with us. And the end will happen when it happens. Let me just take this comment. Somebody
you sound like those people.
Yeah. So I don't know. B Smith 38. Placebo can regrow hair if you believe. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard you say, Doug. So that's not my research. This is, I think it's Dr. Ritkin, but it's in my notes. I mean, So I'm not making that up. I'm just reporting what I find, right, about the whole placebo and nocebo effect. And placebos are very, very powerful. And a placebo is you think you're taking a drug, but it turns out it's just sugar.
It has no therapeutic value.
Yeah, but
No
it's all
therapeutic
up here. And the power of the mind is very, very powerful. So for those
it's
that
called
maybe
psychic energy.
well, I mean, I think anything can be manipulated and misused and abused and all that stuff. But you know, sometimes we imagine ourselves to death. You know, we are constantly fretting about stuff, and then. But anyway, that's a different topic. But you know, it's kind of mind. You know, it's not mind. Well, mind over matter. I don't know. But the point is that there's real studies that real scientists, real doctors have done on these things to show
it's
that
biblical.
you know,
Be anxious for nothing.
Yep.
With prayer and supplication, let your requests be made known.
Yeah.
I mean, it is biblical. In other words, we are actually instructed not to be anxious, not to be depressed. There may be sad circumstances. Like I've lost 2 dogs. That's not a big deal, but I lost a nephew a year and a half ago. I was sad. You know, I lost my dad 7 years ago. I was sad. I wasn't running around going, "Amen, my daddy's dead," you know, but you can still have joy knowing you're going to see your father again. I can still have joy with my sister, who's obviously struggling with this a lot more than I am, and my niece. But you don't have to wallow in it. Death is part of this life until Yeshua returns.
Right.
And even then, there will be death in the next stage. But it's not like, it's not just power positive thinking, not this new age nonsense, not this Norman Vincent Peale stuff, but the way you, if you look at life through a biblical worldview, we're all going to die. Your family members are going to die unless we tarry until Yeshua returns. And so there's no, again, I've never been depressed, so I can't relate. I mean, I really can't relate to people who just struggle with this. So, you know, and we did on my channel, and it's on Olive Branch and Donkey Speaks. We did like a 3-hour roundtable on this issue of the deception of pharmakia, and how a lot of people, they do get sad over life circumstances. And so the doctor gives them a pill for it, and it masks the symptoms. They never actually address the issue. They don't address the grief that we're naturally going to experience, those 5 stages of grief. And so they're masking the symptom, just like most modern day pharmakia is not curing you. It's masking or hiding or reducing the symptoms, as opposed to eat good, as Jessica does. I see her Shabbat pictures and all her food pictures. Exercise, you know,
every day,
live a healthy lifestyle, get out in the sun, play some golf, do some fishing, do some hunting, you know, get out in the sun, get your vitamin D, do some skiing.
There you go.
And if we would do these things and get out from the house, get out from the screens, you know, you can check your phone, you know, then I think that would go a long way toward helping people.
Yeah.
If they have that biblical view.
We're out of time, but I want to give Jessica a few more minutes to if she has anything. I don't know.
I do.
Good. So please.
Well, I want to respond to that really quick. So with that gentleman or whoever that comment was. So when I said psychic energy, again, in school, in psychology, not that I subscribe to any of the teachings, but I was back in the day in school for psychology, Christian psychology. But the word for soul in the Greek is suke. It's where we get the word psyche or psychic. It's this form of, so the soul has psychic energy. That's just where the word comes from. But I want to give you just a quick little definition here. It says the soul as the vital principle that is the animating element in both men and animals. So it's part of the animation, right? You can animate or create something out of that energy. And again, that's what people would say is like, you know, mind over matter, or, you know, willpower. That's where those ideas come from, that the soul has the ability to manifest and to create maybe even short term, but reality. But I do want to go back really quick and just conclude with this. I pulled out my Dead Sea Scrolls, and it's
Nice.
4Q 4Q 530, column 2, where it talks about these monsters that were being created. And I just wanted to read real quick. It says, and the inhabited world that they left like strong winds and flew with his hands like eagles, he left behind the inhabited world and passed over desolation, the great desert. And so I thought about that desolation, that place of darkness, and bringing it all back to where we started, that unseen realm, that place of darkness or desolation, right? That place of destruction, the shadow realms, or the death. That's where they're bound. They're bound. That realm of death.
Man, this was fun. Man, I'm
so
glad
much fun.
Oh, it was. I'm really glad you came on. We had a great time.
I've asked her to join us regularly, but she's too busy.
My timing, my schedule. But this was early. This is early. Anything later on my channel is just not a no-go. But this was early, so this was good.
Well, we always do it early.
I enjoy you guys.
Thank you.
Yeah. I can come on your channel. It's just Thursdays. It's just intense for me.
We'll see what we can do. But thank you, God, that you joined us. Tell people where they can find your channel again.
Oh, I am the host of Crossing Over with my name, Jessica Arellanes. And I pretty much broadcast on Tuesdays, 5 p.m. time, Pacific time. 5 p.m. Pacific time. Yeah.
Crossing Over with Jessica Arellanes. So check it out, guys, right here on YouTube. Also, we are going to Israel 2024. So if you've never been, if you've already been, you want to go again, please go with us. Check it out at thewaycongregation.com. And we have a button that just says Israel trip. So do that. We've kept it as affordable as we possibly can. It's going to be a great trip. You're going to love it. So we're running out of seats. There's still some left, but don't wait too long. Okay. Because that's really important. Also, please be in prayer about Regenesis Code. First of all, listen to it, read it, whatever. I think you're going to love it just because I think it's a great story. Okay. I'm very biased, but I worked really hard on it, and I think you're going to like it. Okay. And I wove a whole bunch of stuff into it. Okay. But the main goal is to get this onto the screen, whether that is Netflix or Angel Studios or whatever. I don't care. I just want people to watch it. And I want the unbelieving world to watch this, because that's really who needs this, right? We kind of know the basic story, but it's the unbelievers who really need it. And they're not going to pick up the Bible. They're not going to go to an end times conference. They're going to watch movies, right? That's what they do. So let's meet them where they are. And so please be in prayer about that. If you know of a producer, you know, an executive producer, you know, a director, you know, somebody that has a studio, somebody that's wanting to make a movie, let me know, please, or tell them about me and get in the book, and let's see if we can't make this a reality. So thank you again, guys. Thank you to my two wonderful co-hosts tonight, and may you all have a great week until next time.